Welcome back to the Old-Fashioned Real Estate Show. That's Jeff Holst. I'm Brian Levredge. Great to be here with you again.
It is great to be here with you, Brian. And today we're going to talk about interest rates. Yeah, caffeine too. Yeah. I'm drinking coffee in an old-fashioned coffee mug, which you can't buy on our website, but we do have other stuff you can buy there.
Yes.
But you could we can get you one. If you really want one, $1 million, I'll figure it out. I'll give you this exact mug.
Been drank from too.
I'll give it to you with the dirty coffee grounds in it if you'd like. But no, we're going to talk about interest rates today, and kind of what's going on with interest rates in the market, but also how to think about them in general from like a historical context, but also like what are the impact of interest rates increasing and what can we expect over the next 3 to 12 months. Because obviously we know more than everyone else about interest rates.
I mean, it could be a really short show, and I could just say in the next 3 to 12 months, I don't know. Right?
But if you stick around to the end, we're going to bring in the absolute certain prediction that Brian Levredge has about where interest rates will be 12 months from now, and it's guaranteed to probably be either right or wrong.
Yeah.
So be sure to stick around for that at the end, and we'll be right back.
Welcome to the Old-Fashioned Real Estate Show, where hosts Brian Levredge and Jeffrey Holst for our old-fashioned real estate advice.
And we're back.
Yes, we are.
And we're talking about interest rates.
Right, yeah. I'm actually really excited to hear your right or wrong prediction.
It's scintillating, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. Okay, so look, everyone knows interest rates have been going up over the last 18 months, something like that. From historical lows in reality to what, seems really high right now, but actually is pretty much the historical norm.
Yes.
So that's the first point that I wanted to make about interest rates is, yes, they're a lot higher. That does impact cost of borrowing funds, but from a historical perspective, interest rates have been much, much higher than this. So that means they could.
Yeah, I mean, our parents that grew up in the 70s and 80s or, were forming households, let's just say that. They borrowed money at, 15 to 20%.
Yeah. I mean, and bank interest rates were paying 10 or 12% at that time.
And I think the point is the world didn't stop when that happened.
Yeah,
right?
That's definitely the case.
Yeah.
And listen, I mean, interest rates have they're like a pendulum. The further they swing one direction, the further they swing the other. We see that sort of regularly over time. Now, honestly, there's multiple layers here, right? There's the big interest rate spike in the late 70s, which is what you're talking about. But what people often forget is before that, interest rates were much lower. The first house I bought from my grandmother. Right? It was a $35,000, 700 square foot 2-bedroom house, right?
Wow, spacious.
Yeah, it was super nice, right? And I bought it from her on owner financing because I was,
How much did she charge
18. I think my interest rate was like 6%.
Oh, okay.
But pretty good because the payment was like $200 a month.
Yeah,
because it was like a $30,000 loan, And the reason she sold it to me on owner financing is because before my grandfather died, he told her never pay off this mortgage because she had a 3.75% mortgage on it. And it was like a 20-year-old mortgage at the time.
She did a wrap.
Yeah. So she just said, I'm going to finance this to you because I can't pay off the mortgage. The payment was very, very small, right, on that. And the reason he told her to never pay it off is because the cost of funds were really, really low relative to the 7 or 8% that everyone else was seeing at the time. And frankly, when he died in the early 80s, much, much higher, right?
Yeah.
So right before he died, he said, don't pay this loan off because you're never going to get money this cheap again. And he was right for years.
About 40 years.
Yeah. He was right for a long time. But then it happened again.
Yeah.
So the point is, yes, we came out of historically low interest rates, but not so historically low that they've never been there before. And yes, we're at much higher interest rates now, but not so high that they've never been here before.
Which sort of segues into, I think the general thesis here, which is that, again, if we're talking about just a return to the historic mean, if you will, but certainly something that for the period of time, I'd say from about, 2015 through about 2021, I guess it was, we were in this low rate environment, right? And so everybody kind of got used to that, and they're waiting for that to come back again. But as you just noted, it could be decades, or maybe never.
It might, or next year.
Yeah,
that's the
or that's
interest rate.
Exactly.
That's why I'm most concerned to hear your prediction.
So the funny part though is that right now we've seen a decline in housing inventory because of what's being termed as the lock-in, right? So many people refinanced or bought, and during that time frame we just described, the last 6-7 years, got a great rate, and they're going, well, why should I move or why should I buy? I mean, the statistics, and this data is a couple of years old and it may have changed, so caveat, but the average homeowner actually owns 7 homes during their lifetime.
Yeah, and the average homeowner lives in a house for only 4 to 5 years. Right, yeah. 4 to 5 years. Now, we all know the person that lived there for 30 years.
Yeah, that was our grandparents.
Yeah, it's just, maybe even our parents, right? Yeah. But it's just not normal now. We're in a much more transient society. And, post-COVID, 2 things have happened, right? One, you have increases in interest rates, which have discouraged people from selling their relatively low. Yes, and then the second one is work from home, which has slowed the need to move. But both of those things are not permanent, right? Interest rates probably will change. We can pretty much guarantee that. And people will change jobs and will have to relocate or have opportunities elsewhere.
Yeah. Or they might have kids, right? Household increases. Yep. Maybe they've got a 3-bedroom house with 2 kids already, and they have a third, and they're going,
or twins.
Even better. Now we need a 4 or a 5-bed house.
And also people with 5-bedroom houses, even with relatively low interest rates, and maybe their house is $700,000-800,000, and their kids have gone off to college, and they're thinking, I actually want to live in a 2-bedroom condo because I don't want to take care of a 7,000 square foot house or whatever craziness they have. These things will happen, and you can only put those life events off so long.
Yeah. Well, and similarly, from an investment standpoint, we see opportunities to buy apartment buildings and other real estate investment assets all the time, but it's declined, right? And part of the big reason for that decline is interest rates, right? Because not only is it harder to make a deal work because of a higher borrowing cost, but similarly, there's a lot less volume happening from a transaction standpoint. So a lot of would-be sellers are just sitting tight, and they're going, sure, we'd like to sell. We've got a lot of equity. But what are we going to trade into?
Yeah, so the main point with the rather quick increase in interest rates that we've experienced is it's put a shock to the system that's caused everything to kind of tighten up a little bit. And normally when interest rates go up, the economic theory is prices come down because as the cost of acquiring funds goes up, people need a better return on their money to justify investing in real estate, right? So if you can go put your money in the bank and get a 5% interest rate, you're not gonna go borrow money from a bank and invest it and then hope to make 4%, right, on your returns. Yeah. And that's what happens as cost of funds goes up, is the return on your invested capital for leveraged real estate at least goes down. And since most people use some form of leverage, their returns have been declining because cost of funds has gone up, and the values have not come down dramatically.
Exactly.
And so do you think that's going to turn? Do you think interest rates are going down, or do you think prices are going down, or what do you think?
Yes,
one or the other? Well, there is a third possibility, right? The third possibility is that rents go up, which keeps both interest rates and pricing up.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually what we're starting to see. We're seeing rents kind of go up, which, of course, rents can only go up as far as wages go up, right? Because there's an upper end limit on what people can afford. But what I think we're seeing in the market is that the inflation that the Fed told us was transitory, that has declined over we're in a deflationary period, not deflation, but we're in a declining inflation period right now. I think what we're seeing is that wages are starting to catch up with the inflation,
Yeah.
and that probably, if rates stay the same, we're, instead of seeing a decline in values, we're going to see an increase in the returns relative to the higher values to make up for.
Well, and there's other things that can happen, right, as a result of this. Like, I tend to think that, of course, all real estate is local, right? So you're going to see regional differences within the U.S., of course. And so, like, the Southeast, the Sun Belt, is a very popular, and has been for a while now, migration destination for people from other parts of the country, from the West, from the Midwest, from the Northeast, moving down here, better climate, cheaper cost of living generally. So if you're in a place with a high cost of living and now a higher, albeit, average, historically speaking, borrowing cost, well, that money's going to go a lot further. Those borrowing costs go a lot further down here than they do in a place like New York or Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So you could see markets getting propped up because of that to an extent.
Yeah.
And similarly with investments, because it works functionally the same.
And this is actually this counterbalances what we were talking about earlier about the work from home thing. Like, if you live in Southern California or you live in Manhattan and now you can work from home and you're going to make those wages, that same wage that you're making there, and you're able to move from a studio apartment that costs you $5,000 a month to a brand new house that's got 5 bedrooms that costs you $5,000 a month. It doesn't seem that expensive to you.
No, exactly.
And so you definitely have that sort of the interest rate and cost environment causing people to shift where their priorities are, where they want to live. For sure. And then you also have people that maybe they're retiring and now they're looking at where do they want to move. We have this huge baby boom generation that's, gradually retiring and dying off. That's going to cause some of that stickiness, the lock-in, to break down.
Yeah. And I think, from an investment perspective, the important thing to note is this, right? There's a saying we have, you marry the asset and you date the debt, right? So even when you've got a great apartment building, or even say a portfolio of them. I mean, we just refinanced from a 3.5% loan on a 20-year amortization into a 6 1/8 rate on a 25-year amortization.
Why did we do that again?
Because that's another. Yeah,
I think we
talked about this in one of our last episodes. But all that's to say is, we recapitalized some so we could go out, look for other assets. That's a reason to do it. But really, getting back on track here is that if you find a good asset and it doesn't work as well right now because rates are higher, but it still works, you really need to think about that.
Right, if you think rates are going down, you can buy something now that works okay, and then when rates go down, it's going to work really well.
And here's the other thing, even if rates stay the same as where they're at, like, inflation's going to do what it does over time, right? It's going to
increase the value.
So if you've still got migration and job growth where you invest, odds are in 5 years, it's going to be kind of a moot point as it is.
Okay, now is the moment we've all been waiting for, Brian. As we wrap up the show, you're going to make your prediction that may or may not be right. 12 months from now, what do you think rates will be on, let's say, single-family homes for the typical borrower? Which, by the way, start with where you perceive them to be now and where you think they're going.
I mean, right now you're talking about an interest rate that's probably in the low to mid 7s, I think.
Sounds right.
Is where it's at. I used to think that rates were going to go down more. I think they'll go down nominally by the end of next year.
So the end of 2024 we're talking about, just for people who are watching this later. Right now we're sitting here, it's October of 2023.
Yes.
So by the December 2024, you think they'll go down to what number?
We might see anywhere between 1/4 and 1/2 point less than where we're at now.
So just under 7 or right around 7.
Yeah, not a giant move though.
So similar to where they are now. That's what you think rates are going to do. And you're guaranteeing that that's either right or wrong.
That part I will guarantee.
All right, and that is the old-fashioned real estate show, and I guarantee that Brian is either right or wrong as well. I personally think he's wrong because I believe rates will be around 5 at the end of next year, but I very much could be either right or wrong as well. So thank you for checking out our show.
We'll see you again.